Welcome to Classic Car Cave. So I hope you have a good new year when it comes. I believe it's the 30th today. So I'm not going to talk about the cars like I usually do. I wanted to go on to something else. It was about a week ago, I believe it was, and I watched the movie Deepwater Horizon. Obviously, being nearly 30 years in the oil business, working offshore and onshore, mostly offshore, all over the world, I thought I'd have a look at it and see what the story was. Now, I appreciate very much that it's Hollywood and they have to pep it up and all that kind of stuff. And for the average person in the street, there's probably a very small percentage that worked in the oil business, so they wouldn't really know what goes on. But some of the stuff in the movie was completely off. I mean, there were little things, and people say, "Oh, well, you're just nitpicking." But I remember one particular scene because the company it showed was Schlumberger, who I worked for. So my career was actually in service companies, and I worked for quite a few years in the North Sea, working 2 and 2, and then eventually I went up to Australia. I emigrated to Australia. I went out there, worked the same kind of deal, but got into the office, more into the office work, or running a base as a base manager, and then I went completely international, and then basically all over the world. Anyway, going back to these disaster things. Now, I worked in the North Sea when Piper Alpha went up. Now, the two particular, I mean, the two worst, the worst ever was obviously Piper Alpha. I mean, there was 165 crew died, and 2 from the rescue boat. So 167 men died in that. You know, it was a massive. And I'd worked on Piper Alpha. I'd done some work on it. I think it was either cementing or some stimulation work. I can't remember. It was a massive rig, and it was one of the better ones. It was the biggest producer in the North Sea at the time. And the 2 other platforms that were producing to it and then going to the pipe ashore was Tartan and Claymore, and I've worked on both of them. There was probably only sort of 10 rigs, so 20. I actually didn't work on it in the North Sea. A lot of semi-submersibles, a lot of jackups, not so many jackups, but a few jackups, big platforms, and worked a lot in Norway initially until they got their own crew. So I just wanted to kind of go over a few things there. I mean, in my experience, I mean, the Piper Alpha disaster was obviously the main cause of it was a failure in communication, and it was due to a hot work permit. They had a permit where they blanked off a pump or isolated a pump with a steel flange. They'd gone off crew. One of the pumps had gone down, and they diverted it to the pump that had been taken out. And of course, the gases came out from the flange. It wasn't secured properly. It probably wouldn't have taken that pressure anyway. It was only there as a backup. And they have what they call a lockout system. And you have a hot work permit, cold work permits, permit to work, and so on. But this somehow got ignored, and this is how the disaster happened. But going back to the movie on Deepwater Horizon, yeah, I mean, again, same kind of situation. The cement job on it, and this is well known because I was involved with cementing. I know what I'm talking about. The cement job wasn't particularly good, and they'd had an undersea blowout. And on the actual film, they show Schlumberger, the logging team, which they go down and do a CBL, cement bond log, which actually tells them if the annulus is filled completely with cement. And apparently that wasn't done because they wanted to save some money. And I could make a whole gamut of videos about oil companies wanting to save money and some of the things that went on. But I'll keep it to this particular thing. But like I say, there was a few things in it, and I thought, this is rubbish. They had a guy, it was Mark Wahlberg and Kurt Russell that were in it. Kurt Russell was the OIM, which is an offshore installation manager. And I think Mark Wahlberg played the chief electrician or something. And the first thing was he came on the rig with him on the helicopter, and they were talking about whether the cement bond log had been done. Now, the chief electrician would have absolutely nothing to do with anything like that. Any service company work, he looks after the platform or the rig. Certainly would not get involved in any of the drilling side of it, that's for sure. Yeah. So that's completely wrong for a start off. Anyway, but it is what it is, it's a movie. But like I said, I mean, these are big disasters, but there's an awful lot of stuff that went on. I mean, in the nearly 30 years I worked in the industry, I at least three deaths. I know I was there, and probably 25, 30 deaths that I was on rigs that I worked on and just either come off or was just about to go on to. And again, a lot of them were it was safety. You often hear in today's industry now, and it was very big in the industry when I started with the oil patch, was LTIs, lost time incidents, or LTAs, lost time accidents. And this was a big thing to get the bonuses for the rig company and for the oil company and getting awards. And a lot of times I've seen guys taken off the rig with an injury, which is lost time accident, on a chopper because they didn't want to lose the LTA time, 120 days or 1,000. A lot of it's bollocks. A lot of it's just made to look like that. I mean, a cut finger or a snap finger or whatever. So sometimes if the guy's going back off the rig that day, they won't count it. There's a lot of stuff goes on. But I remember the three particular incidents we had. The first one happened to me in the North Sea where I won't go tell you the name of the people and tell you the name of the rig and the date because it was quite horrific. The first one was a welder we had on a semi-submersible rig where they have a thing called a gooseneck. So on a semi-submersible you have to have a compensator. Obviously the rig is going up and down, so you have a compensator on the drawworks. And one of the pipes that goes down to the BOP, the blowout preventer, one of the goosenecks was damaged, and they had to not shut down, but what they had to do, the waves were quite reasonable, so they put a welder onto a hoist, or a tugger line as it's known, down through the drill floor, sat him in a bosun's chair to weld this gooseneck up or to patch it up until they could get at it properly. Unfortunately, the night shift, because it's 12 to 12, everybody works, so it's 12 at night till 12 the next day, and then you swap over. Everything's 12 to 12, so it never shuts down. Anyway, unfortunately, the night crew, they weren't doing anything because he was working, and everything was shut down. So one crew went down one set of steps from the derrick, and the other crew came up the other set and didn't hand over properly. Normally you talk to the man you're handing over to, you tell him what's going on, but they didn't do this. Didn't notice that this line was down through underneath the rig floor with this man in a man chair welding, and unfortunately they pulled on the tugger and tried to pull him through basically the steel substructure of the floor. Obviously killed him instantly when it hit the bottom of the floor, and he fell onto one of the gooseneck he was actually working on, and they never did recover his body. But the police came out, I remember, the next day, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't a murder, it was an accidental death. There was another one in Vietnam where it was caused by a Vietnamese government official. Again, I won't talk about what the name of the rig was, but it was in Vietnam, and it was off a place called Vung Tau in Vietnam, and they were running some casing. So this is the casing, the steel casing they're running the hole to produce. Well, they had production tubing, but the steel casing they build a well in, and they were stabbing some tubing. I think it was, I can't remember, 9058 or 1338, I can't remember. And they have this stabbing arm that the crew come out, the casing crew come out and do, and the guy was on this like a small monkey board. The monkey board is up in the derrick, but it was a small monkey board, and he was hydraulic, and there was a set of overriders down on the rig floor, and we had these Vietnamese officials on the rig that did nothing. They were just there because of the communist thing. They were just there, and this guy had just stabbed a pipe. They were coming down with the elevators. He was adjusting his rope, and he had his back to the elevators. This Vietnamese government guy decided to park his ass on this console and push the guy underneath the elevators. Of course, they weighed tons, the whole rig, and of course it come down and broke his neck and killed him. And the last one was in Indonesia, and that was a drowning. We worked on a land rig. It was a geothermal well, which not a lot of people have worked on, but a completely different set of drilling systems. And they used to have these big ponds that are filled with plastic sheeting, and they put the mud and the water in this to make the mud for drilling the hole. and unfortunately they had a lad there go down to start one of the pumps up, and because it was slippery he fell into the water, and his friend realised he couldn't swim and jumped in, or tried to jump in to save him, and they both died. They both drowned. And right about 20 feet from where they were was a ladder, or an old wooden ladder made out of bamboo or something. If he'd just got the ladder and picked it up and passed it to him, he could have got them out. They both would have survived. But there you go. But these rig disasters, I mean, and the rig injuries. I mean, if you ever look online, if you're interested in it, what happens to get oil out the ground, it's quite unbelievable. The amount of deaths is huge. Now, when I finished my career, or I retired, I was what they call service quality champion. So one of my jobs was looking after safety training, sending people to America or different countries for training, making sure they were up to date with new standards and stuff like that. So I had a lot to do with safety, and all the safety bulletins worldwide within the company used to come to me, and everybody else, of course. And I was well services, so everything to do with well services, which is cementing, stimulation, core tubing, downhole tools, everything in that gamut was my area of expertise before I left the oil patch. But sorry about that. But just going back to this film, some of the stuff in it, as I said, the first bit that amazed me was Schlumberger guys with the logging team were going off the rig in their coveralls. That is an absolute no-no. You'll never get onto a chopper in coveralls. It doesn't happen. You come out, you come down into the rec room, you give your life jacket to the next guy, and he goes back up. They don't stand on the heli deck having a chat. This is absolute nonsense. And the other things in it were, like I said, the relationships between the chief engineer. This is not being disparative to a chief electrician, but he would not have any knowledge of what was going on the rig. It's absolute nonsense. And there was a girl in it. It was in ballast control, and she was on about this as well. She would have nothing to do with that. There are separate entities. There's drilling, there's maritime, and there's the engineering side. Whether that be subsea engineer, which is the BOP stack, which is down on the seabed, or welders, or mechanics. They're different parts. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up. But if you watch the movie, it's worth a watch. But if you know anything about the oil patch, I can tell you now, it's Hollywood stamped all over it. But there you go. Anyway, I just thought I'd bring you this little ditty, this little thing to clear up a few things. And yeah, I'll hopefully have a good new year, and I'll catch you in 2024. Take care. Have a good one, guys.